I'm going to begin with a little history this morning. As some of you know, my first career was that of a clinical psychologist, and I trained at VCU some, and this is hard for me to say, but some 40 years ago, almost 40 years ago. It's a long time. And I almost earned the distinction then of being the graduate student who took the longest to complete her PhD. But when I look back on that training and the field of psychology in general, as it was then, in comparison to what is happening in psychology now, the differences are huge. And perhaps most significant to the aspiring clinician that I was then, the view of the humans, of the people we were to be treating, was strongly biased toward finding out what was wrong with them, so that we could then initiate some appropriate interventions. What disorder did they have? In fact, Martin Seligman, who is probably the most well-known living American psychologist today, remarked that for the last 50 years of the 20th century, professional psychology ought better to have been called victimology. So obsessed had it been with the study of what's wrong with people, what's wrong with their emotional lives, their relationships, their physical brains, why they fail and feel bad and do terrible things to each other. So it's really no wonder that going to a therapist was considered pretty stigmatizing in so many ways. Of course, today there's still a lot of attention, as there should be, given to easing the suffering of serious mental disorders. But it is notable that the past 20 years has seen the academic world giving significant attention to rebalancing this view. And much of the credit for this goes to Martin Seligman because of the challenge that he issued to the field of psychology when he became president of the American Psychological Association in 1998. First, he claimed that it was important to recognize that psychology was half-baked. He said literally half-baked. We have baked the part about mental illness, but the other side's unbaked, the side of strength, the side of what we're good at. He went on to say that this is because since World War II, psychology has concentrated on repairing damage within a disease model of human functioning. Psychology's focus on the negative, he said, left us knowing too little about the many instances of growth, mastery, drive, and character building that can develop out of painful life events. So for 50 years, psychology apparently had its own negativity bias. Fortunately, academic psychology seems to have taken Seligman's challenge to bake the other side seriously. The trend in the field in the 21st century has been toward the scientific study of what makes people happy and good. Seligman himself went on to found the Positive Psychology Center at the University of Pennsylvania, which, by the way, currently has 37,000 people enrolled in an online course about positive psychology. Think about the ripple effect that might have. Cal Berkeley has the Greater Good Science Center studying gratitude and altruism. Stanford has the Center for Compassion. And the Innerwork Center's upcoming keynote speaker, Barbara Fredrickson, is from the University of North Carolina, has a free online intro course to the science of happiness on her website. So, and she's coming, she's speaking. You might go to the Innerwork Center's website and find out she's this week. I think it's Thursday night, isn't it, Susan?
29th.
29th. She's very much worth listening to. All of this research on goodness and what makes us happy has consistently found that cultivating and experiencing these positive emotions and these positive states favorably impact our health and well-being. So what has this got to do with mindfulness? Well, first of all, I think it's good news that we humans are no longer only studied as flawed beings to be fixed. Rather, we're also seen as beings with the capacities to love, to care, to connect, and to work for the common good. And secondly, though I haven't seen this connection made elsewhere, I think that mindfulness in general, and John Kabat-Zinn in particular, played a major role in tilting psychology in this positive direction. From 1979 on, when formulating and teaching MBSR at the University of Massachusetts General Hospital, patients participating in the MBSR and Kabat-Zinn's program were told, from our point of view, as long as you are breathing, there is more right with you than wrong with you. He went on to write, the practice of mindfulness involves finding, recognizing, and making use of that in us which is already okay, and already beautiful, already whole, by virtue of our being human, and drawing upon it to live our lives as if it really mattered, how we stand in relationship to what arises, whatever it is. So by the time Seligman issued his challenge in 1998, MBSR and mindfulness had been in the air for almost 20 years, baking the other side. So, as Philip would say, what's the so what of this? Who we are, of course, is a combination of our less than skillful, sometimes dysfunctional tendencies. We all have them. Our judging minds, our threat-sensitive brain, our personal reactivity. But we are so much more than those. Each of us also has positive qualities like our humane empathy, like generosity, like kindness, like compassion. And it might be interesting as an experiment to check in with yourself, to find out how evenly you are baked, to reflect as you go through your day or week. Where does the dial land when your thoughts are about you? Toward the dissatisfactions you have about this self of yours? Or towards the positives, the goodness that is particular to you? And where does that dial land when you think about other people in your life, or other people in general? How much critical commentary do you find? How much goodness is registered? In other words, the question could be, what are you baking?
Not surprisingly, I've been paying attention of late to what I've been baking. And a particular recent experience came up for me as I thought about this. We have neighbors a couple doors away with teenage children, and they decided more than a year ago that they wanted to have a pool, swimming pool, put in their backyard and have it ready by last summer. Well, once they got into the process, they discovered that no swimming pool contractors were available to start work until November. So they missed a whole summer. And once the work began in November, it was really messy. We live in a cul-de-sac, and the construction equipment, the dirt out in the cul-de-sac, it was pretty messy. And they're still at a stage that even though they have the pool in the ground and they have water in the pool, they're far from finished with the landscaping. And this is what my half of baking focused on, in addition to being irritated about the messiness of the project. I focused on the fact they haven't put up a fence. And of course, county code requires a fence Your insurance requires a fence, the pool's an attractive nuisance, etc. So there I am in my judging and fixing part of me that is extremely well baked, thoroughly baked, probably well overcooked. And then Kay said a couple days ago, I've been thinking about the fact that they're getting ready to move into spring and have this pool ready, and I think I'm going to send them a load of beach towels, some extra special towels to have with the pool. And in that moment, just like that, my inner being shifted to another part of me that maybe isn't baked as thoroughly as the what's wrong part of me, but I do have access to. And it elicited appreciative joy in me to think about sending beach towels over there and what that meant that they were about to start their swimming pool experience. And I was just happy for them. And my whole attitude about this experience shifted just in that moment as I accessed a different part of me. And this is how we are as humans, and it's okay. Some parts of us are more baked than others. Some parts of us are more accessible at times than others. And as we know, life is hard. And sometimes when we get caught up in the part of us that's so thoroughly baked looking for the negative, we make life harder. We make it even harder than it actually is. I mean, it's not my responsibility to be concerned about how their project is going. The fact is, I may have been a little irritated about the construction, but I wasn't really adversely affected by it. Maybe visually, but it's just not that big a deal. I kept making things harder. So here we are as human beings. We're neither perfect nor imperfect. We just are. Parts of us are more thoroughly baked than others. And that's just an opportunity. And the opportunity here is about mindfulness. To paraphrase Jon Kabat-Zinn, when we apply mindfulness, then we create the opportunity for not making life harder. What he guides us to pay attention to in the quote that Kay offered us is learning to access what is already in us, what's already here, even if it may not be apparent. We're okay. We're beautiful. We're whole. We have the innate capacities to love, care, connect, and collaborate with others. And as I found that appreciative joy for my neighbors, I discovered one of these qualities, one of these characteristics of being enough that's already there. Mindfulness helps us be more diligent about what we choose to cultivate. By using awareness, we create a little space, and in that space we can choose. And what we can begin to realize is that we are enough, that we have this awareness. We do have the ability to figure out what's wrong. And that's valuable. However, it's incomplete. It's in focusing on what's wrong all the time is an incomplete way of living a human life. We can also turn our attention to how we connect to our basic inherent capacities to care and connect, to belong, to be kind. We can remember that we have the ability to self-regulate. And we have the ability to learn. a big part of what mindfulness invites us to learn is that life is not permanent. Everything's impermanent. Life is not perfect. It's hard. And we don't have to take everything personally. A little dirt in the street, no need for me to take that personally. And with our awareness, with our learning, we can understand these 4 conditions that affect us. The ones that make us reactive with a negative bias, what our genetic mix is, the experiences we've had when we were young that affected us in perhaps some very positive ways and also some negative ways. And we can get clear about what the cultural message, the socio-cultural messages are that really shape us. When we have these understandings about how life is, the reality of how life is, then we don't need to be caught up in what's negative, and we don't need to be a Pollyanna about life either. It's about seeing clearly so that we have a sense of what's going on, so that we can pay attention to which part of ourselves we might want to bake a little more. So let's take a moment and do a brief reflection. What is the specific quality of your personal enoughness, your personal okayness that is a resource for you, that's been a resource for you in the past, that you might want to cultivate a little more? Just put back in the oven and let it go for another 10 or 15 minutes as it moves toward becoming fully baked. What quality of your enoughness is a resource for you? Your ability to learn, to self-regulate, to be kind and connect. So we'll move on to our reflection question, which is very specifically inviting you to share, how are you accessing, that is, baking your enoughness, your resources?